I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Omni viewer, and I've decided to do a follow-up to the Roald Dahl video I recently did because even though based on the comments it seems that those of you who watched the video agree that the decision being made by Puffin Press to change the original works to be more acceptable for a modern audience is a bad idea, I have seen some people in the comments defending it and bringing up arguments that I didn't think of prior to making the video, and I feel those particular counter arguments need addressing. Now, don't go hunting down those people to harass them or something. I am making this video to respond to them, and I'm not personally attacking them. I am just taking the arguments as they are, and I am going to break down why I don't think they actually justify a thing. So let us begin with a particular claim that might be a little bit tricky. One thing I keep seeing pop up is the claim that even though I said I hadn't seen many cancellations or bannings happening recently, there's been that sort of thing happening in quote unquote red states like Florida. That comes up quite a bit, where books are being banned left and right from school districts. Now, I'm pretty sure that based on the clues, the fact that they're specifying Florida or red states in general, and since it seems to be happening with school districts, I'm thinking they are talking about how there has been a lot of backlash recently from parents who discover that their children are being taught things like critical race theory, or books with sexually explicit content are being shown to them. And we're talking about really small children that this stuff is being exposed to here. There are plenty of videos you can find about it, of both the meetings themselves with the parents bringing this work before everyone, sometimes being told stop reading it because it's too graphic, and some people commenting on whether or not they think they're right or wrong to do this. That's the best I can think of. Maybe I'm off the mark. Now, there are some things I feel I need to clarify. First of all, when I said I hadn't noticed any cancelings in a while, I was referring specifically to cancel culture. The act of going around and demanding that a particular work or character or something be censored completely, removed from the cultural zeitgeist because it was deemed outdated and offensive. That was happening for quite a little bit, and it seemed to reach a peak. And since that peak, I haven't really seen that much of that particular aspect happening. That's what I was referring to. Now, regarding what's going on in these particular school districts, if I am right in my assessment, first of all, I want to make very clear that I don't think that children should be shown sexually explicit images. I mean, there are laws against that pretty much across the entire country. And I also personally believe that critical race theory is a very damaging philosophy, and the evidence is all around us and has been for the past few years. But my own personal feelings about that aside, does this somehow conflict with the point I'm trying to make about being anti-censorship? Well, call this a cop-out if you want, but I think it's a different discussion. Figuring out what is and is not allowed to be taught in a school curriculum or allowed to be kept in a school library where children are present, that is its own discussion. Not an unimportant discussion. It is something that should be kept in the conversation, but it's not specifically what I'm talking about, which is a publisher holding the rights to certain books and deeming that those books need to be altered in order to better suit their own view of what things should be like. different conversation here. Now, that being said, I have heard of instances wherein the backlash against these books sometimes results in books that maybe shouldn't be banned getting swept in along with everything else. In particular, I reported on that happening to Mouse, the Art Spiegelman graphic novel in a school district down south. I thought that was a bad idea. Now, if it had been in an elementary school, I would say that book doesn't belong there, certainly, but I believe it was a high school this was done with. And it was banned because of the sexual content, even though, one, it's not really sexual in nature, and two, it's not really the point of the book. But either way, I would encourage different school districts to have a more discerning eye with this sort of thing. But at the same time, I do think this is a completely different subject and it's being brought up mostly as a distraction. So we're going to set it aside. The main focus here is on what Puffin Press is doing to the Roald Dahl books, and that is a different matter entirely. Okay, so one particular argument I've seen in favor of changing these books is because they need to be updated to leave a better impression. I mean, never mind that Roald Dahl books are intentionally designed to be dark and disturbing. Basically, they're some of them are just plain flat out horror stories for kids, but you don't want to impart the morals of yesteryear on the children who will be bringing us into tomorrow. That sort of thing. Now, I've already said that if you are updating certain things, like inserting certain sentences and extracting certain words, but you're not changing the rest of the content of the story, you're ultimately going to subvert your message. Suppose you have a daughter and you want her to aspire to greatness, but you know that in the original print of The Witches, they mention women being things like secretaries and cashiers, and nothing else. So you feel like if you let her read that book, it's somehow going to limit her perception of what she can achieve. So you're going to get the new version so that she can be encouraged to aspire to greatness. You know, there's still a problem. The new version of The Witches alters the book to say that witches can be anywhere, including CEOs or scientists, and therefore be in positions of power, but they're still child-eating monsters. The book has now equated being a girl boss with being pure evil. So do you really think that's an improvement? Of course, if you really believe that the original book is somehow going to leave a negative impact on your daughter and her aspirations, you could always, I don't know, give her a different book to read, give her something that you think will inspire her, and not let her read The Witches. Although that would require you to be the one who is banning the book, so that's kind of ironic. Or here's another idea. Let her read a Roald Dahl book and encourage her aspirations. Sometimes those two can, in fact, be mutually exclusive. When I was a very, very small child, I was so obsessed with dinosaurs that I wanted to be a paleontologist. If I read a book about a guy who was a policeman, you know what I wanted to be when I put that book down? A paleontologist. Because the book didn't have any effect on my aspirations. I'm just saying. I've also occasionally seen it said that I misused the word censorship, because it is not actually censorship. And at least one of the people who was saying that decided to go with the argument of implying that only governments can censor things. A common tactic I've seen used before. I first really saw it start to pop up when certain controversial YouTubers were getting really big, and they would start banning specific comments and people from their comment sections. And when people said they were censoring their audience's right to speak out, they would say, no, 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 I'm not censoring anyone because governments censor things. I am just the person in control of my channel, so I decide who gets to say what and where, and whether or not I want it to stay. Which is censorship. It's kind of like when the word racism was changed to not just mean bigotry against a person, but bigotry coming from a place of privilege against a person who doesn't have privilege, and then defining who exactly has that privilege and who doesn't, so racism can only ever go in one direction by that definition. Don't support that myself, but yeah, I do believe this is censorship, because it is literally people determining that something needs to be altered or removed in order for a thing to be made suitable. What other definition is there? I still say it's censorship. Just because the book is still available, it is available in an altered state. We would call it censorship in any other situation, I think. Perhaps the most disturbing counter-argument I ran across stated that technically Puffin Press does have the right to change Roald Dahl's bibliography however they want because they are the legal owners of those books. Therefore, as the legal owners, those documents are theirs to do with as they please. Yeah, I'm gonna break this down by way of a little hypothetical scenario. Let us suppose just for a moment that I, the Omni viewer, became independently wealthy, like insanely wealthy. Bill Gates and Elon Musk come to me for loans kind of wealthy. And I decide with this wealth that I'm going to open a new art museum, but I want the centerpiece of that art museum to be an original masterpiece. So I go full glass onion and decide to buy the original Mona Lisa. I go to the Louvre, write them a check with a number so big they can't possibly say no. I take the painting, bring it back home to America, and set up my museum. It's a deal that's completely above board. I am now the legal owner of the original Mona Lisa painting. And as I set up my museum, and I'm spending time just admiring this masterpiece that's considered the most iconic painting in the world, things start to stand out to me. Little details here and there that don't really match my perception of what good art should look like. Things that are standing out in a bad way. Things that irritate me. Things that offend my sensibilities as a person who admires art. And so I make an announcement to the world. I have discovered flaws in the Mona Lisa. And I am not going to let it go that way any longer. It has been flawed this whole time, but I have a little bit of artistic experience myself, so I'm going to use my own brush, apply it to the canvas, and fix the Mona Lisa so that it truly is perfect. Now, I'm the legal owner of that painting in this scenario. It's my canvas, legally, above board. I can do whatever I want to it in that regard. But do you really think anyone in the world would let me get away with it? Heck no. Best case scenario, they'd be protesting outside my establishment every single day. Worst case scenario, they'd break in and try to wrest the painting from me, even if they had to pry it from my cold dead hands. And if it were discovered that I had applied so much as a single drop of paint to the edge of the canvas, I would have been declared as having ruined the Mona Lisa. Why? Because this isn't a question of legality. It's a question of ethics and morality. It was mine legally, but ethically, was it really mine to do with as I please? And you know how I know this scenario is completely true and would actually happen if I ever somehow managed to make it so? Because that's exactly what we're seeing play out with the Roald Dahl scenario. The owners of these manuscripts, the legal owners, have decided that they are going to alter these manuscripts, and people from all over the world, from all walks of life, are saying, no, that's not your place. You do not have the right to alter this man's legacy without his permission, which he can't give by way of being deceased. What you're doing is disgusting. It's morally reprehensible. It's also sanitizing history, which is disgusting and morally reprehensible in its own right. Another thing I've seen come up is that this is about capitalism. It's about making money because Puffin Books wants to change these works so that they can sell better to people with different standards in the future. Never mind that these books have existed for generation after generation, and even as the standards have changed, people still go back and say that they're good books all the same. No, apparently now's the point we have to change them because otherwise they're going to stop selling. I really don't know where this is coming from. Well, actually, I kinda do. Puffin did release an official statement saying that was the reason, but if they really think that's what's gonna happen, they were duped. The whole reason they made this decision in the first place is because some kind of sensitivity group went to them and started pointing out all the different things in these books that were problematic and how they need to be changed in order to be more sensitive to people's issues these days. Now look, before someone puts words in my mouth, I'm not saying that people should be insensitive to each other. I'm saying that sensitivity groups have particular agendas in mind. And the thing of it is, these books have existed, like I said, for a very long time without really offending anybody. I mean, yes, there was the one instance in which Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was altered so that the Oompa Loompas were no longer African pygmies, but as mentioned in that first video, that was a decision that Roald Dahl consciously agreed to. He made that choice, so that is the only scenario in which I would say a book ever should be altered, if it is the original creator's choice to do so. But let's get back to the main point at hand. If Puffin really thinks they were going to make money off of this, they have not been paying attention. First of all, the change isn't really motivated by money in the first place. They did all of this stuff in order to essentially avoid being called istophobic. They're virtue signaling. That's what this is. And as far as making money goes, we have seen this scenario play out many times before, where something exists for a very long time and has a consistent audience throughout all of those years. Then suddenly some random third party enters and out of nowhere proclaims that the thing is offensive and needs to be changed. The people who are in charge of that thing panic and change it immediately without thinking. The changes lead to it being inferior, driving away the established audience, and the people who demanded that change in the first place either don't stick around because they weren't actually that interested to begin with, or if they do stick around, there's not enough of them to actually sustain this thing. And whoever is in charge is the proverbial boob left holding the bag. We've seen it happen so many times before. You know the old saying about how 1 time is an event, 2 times is a coincidence, and 3 times is a pattern? We are well beyond the number 3 at this point. We have seen this happen with Ghostbusters. We've seen it happen with Terminator. We've seen it happen with Star Trek. We've seen it happen with Star Wars. We've seen it happen with Marvel Comics. We've seen it happen with DC Comics. We've seen it happen with adaptations of Marvel and DC Comics. We've seen it happen with Doctor Who. We've seen it happen... I'm even losing count by now. Lord of the Rings, anyone? The Witcher? Saints Row? It keeps happening, and it consistently, these works wind up failing, financially especially. They're also very poorly received by anyone who does bother to experience them in the first place. And the few who think they're really worthwhile, they're just not enough. You see, this is the problem when you try changing something for a modern audience. The modern audience doesn't exist. There is more hard evidence for the existence of Bigfoot than there is for the existence of the modern audience. In fact, there's more hard evidence for the existence of unicorns. No, seriously, the woolly rhinoceros, that's considered the template for the unicorn. Look it up. The companies who own these works basically get tricked into thinking that a vocal minority is the actual majority, and when they make changes to appeal specifically to what they think is going to be their new audience, the actual audience always departs, or if they stick around, they are not happy. Like I said, we have seen it play out many times. In fact, I was having a very similar argument to this a few years ago regarding Looney Tunes. There were some controversies a few years ago, you may recall. The major controversies were these. Elmer Fudd and Yosemite Sam were no longer allowed to use guns. Any other kind of weapon, but no guns. Reason? Promoting gun violence. Pepe Le Pew was censored, thrown into the proverbial vault. Reason? Perpetuating rape culture and making light of sexual harassment. Lola Bunny was redesigned for her appearance in Space Jam 2. Reason? Wanting to desexualize her and make her a more empowering character. Now, I had spoken at length about what pointless changes these were and how they weren't actually going to make any difference, and in fact, a lot of them didn't even have anything to do with the problems that people thought they were fixing. If you want to hear my full thoughts, go watch those videos. I'm not going to repeat myself here. But as I was saying that, I was being confronted by some people who came in and said, "No, Omni, you don't get it. You're no longer the target audience for this stuff. There's a modern audience with a different set of sensibilities than you, and they're the ones who are going to be bringing these characters into the future. So you have to get with the times because the Looney Tunes sure have, and if you can't get into that, that's your problem." And how did that play out? Let me think. Well, for starters, Space Jam 2 was a box office flop, and Lola Bunny, well, lots of people agree her design in that movie was not a good one. Not to mention she'd already basically been desexualized anyway. Everyone's favorite version of her is pretty much still the one from the Looney Tunes show. Elmer and Sam eventually got their guns back because the Looney Tunes cartoons on HBO Max were already going in such grisly and bizarre directions that not having guns was basically kind of a pointless gesture anyway. Pepe Le Pew has made a couple of appearances since his supposed cancellation, and I believe his cartoons are back in syndication on Boomerang, possibly. I've seen them in ads, certainly. But really, no connection could be made between him and the stuff he was accused of perpetuating. Same with Elmer, Sam, and the stuff they were accused of perpetuating. And what else? Oh yeah, Looney Tunes Cartoons was canceled, and other Looney Tunes projects that were in production are now being shopped around to other streaming services in hopes of still seeing the light of day. So apparently, the Looney Tunes were not considered a high priority during that Time Warner AT&T merger. Wonder why? You would think that this modern audience that was going to sustain them would have been big enough to justify keeping them around and continuing to spend money on those projects. But no, everyone stopped caring. Even I, someone who originally liked those first little bit of Looney Tunes cartoons, eventually just got sick of them and didn't like them anymore. I'm not even subscribed to HBO Max today. So, that didn't exactly work out, and my assessment of that whole scenario aged remarkably well. They say history repeats itself. In the end, I still stand by my assessment of this. The censorship / alteration / whatever the heck you want to call it of Roald Dahl's work is a disgusting act. Does Puffin legally own the rights? Sure. Does that mean they're allowed to do whatever they want with it? No. The most succinct way I can put it is to say that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. Here's the thing, whatever your reasons are for supporting this, they're not going to help you in the long run. It may seem like a safe idea to be following behind the devil rather than staying in his way, but just remember that eventually he will turn around and set his sights on you. And when that happens, well, don't say you weren't warned.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books, Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.